welcome to the Sculpture Blacksmithing Studio, the Toledo Museum of Art. My name is Hans Rubel, and I'm going to do a blacksmithing demonstration. Today I'm making a leaf hook, something like this. We're going to use various techniques, which I'll talk about along the way. What am I using? I'm using mild steel. This material, this is 3/8 inch square by 12 inches is all I need to make one hook. Now, to heat the steel, I'm going to go ahead and grab it with these tongs and go in the gas forge. We use gas forges to heat our steel here at the museum. I do like to use coal, more traditional fuel, solid fuels. But it's a lot messier with the coal dust, and then you need a place to store the fuel. And for this studio, working with gas is just a little easier. Actually, I use gas. I use propane, LP gas in my own studio for some of the same reasons. Now, the working range of steel, checking the color. A lot of this is done by eye. I work as high as orange to yellow color on the hot end to a low red color on the low end. Anywhere in there is a good working range for the steel. Any hammering, twisting, whatever shaping I do at those temperatures. If I go above that, I can burn the steel. If I go below that, you run the risk of cracking your steel. It'll break. So, already I've reached temperature. First step, I'm going to start on the leaf end, is to make a blunt point. So I'm going to bring the steel out and go to this anvil. And here we go. So this is a double horn anvil, has two horns. I'm going to wipe the face off. What is falling off the steel is a layer of burned steel called fire scale, or you could call it anvil dust if you want. The hammer, my favorite go-to hammer is this 1,000 gram. It's technically a Swedish style, but it's a European hammer, so it's in grams. It's 1,000 grams, about 2.2 pounds. Actually, for the next step, I'm going to use a little different shaped hammer, but it's a little bigger. I need a little more oomph. So this is a 1,500 gram hammer, and I'm going to use this tool. This is called, nicknamed a guillotine tool from this up and down guillotine actor. You can actually replace these. I have several attachment. So you can use it to cut steel, but in this case, with the rounded end, I'm actually going to neck in or create an indentation in the steel. A smith might call that fullering. So I'm going to put the steel in, make sure I line it up the spot I want. The longer, well, let me hammer first. Check. Good. I don't want to make it too thin. So I've necked in that material. What's nice is it pushes from both directions evenly, so it necks in that material really nice and quickly. So yeah, I put sometimes cutting attachments in here. There's other things you can do with this, but okay, so the next step is I want to flatten that end. So the necked in area defines what the area between the stem and the leaf. So I'm going to take it to the anvil, get a couple taps with the flat side of the hammer, then I turn it around, use the crossbeam side of the hammer, So the cross beam is the narrow end of the hammer, and it spreads the material, in this case left to right. So it's going to widen it, create a wide, flat leaf shape. Now, as I'm working to size, wiping my anvil off, I'm going to take my tongs, and as they get hot, I'm going to quench them in water. The reason I do that is if they get too hot, then they're too hot to hold, but also it's important because when they're hot, they get too hot, they're going to lose their shape. So it's something I just do out of habit to keep the tool in good shape, and so I don't burn my hand, of course. So this typically takes 2 to 3 heatings or heats to spread out that leaf. I'm slightly overlapping the hammer blows. I don't want to, again, like I was talking about, work the steel too cold or it will crack. Once you've necked in material with a tool like this, that spot becomes a bit of a weak point. So I don't want to work the steel at all if it's below that low red color, because I know it will crack at that point. So one more heat to make it a little bit wider. And you know, I know it kind of looks like I'm randomly hammering, but believe it or not, I'm thinking about every hammer blow and what it's going to do to the steel. And so I make slight adjustments as I go to get the right shape. Okay, so there you go. I've got a nice width that I like for the leaf. It's got a little texture I like. Okay, so next step is I'm going to start to form the leaf, and then I'll shape the stem of the leaf after that. So to shape the leaf, I like to put a crease in it. You can see on the back as well as the front, this crease I put in. To do that, I'm going to literally fold the steel in half. And to get it started, I find what works really well is to use a tool that's called a treadle hammer and a hot cut. Not actually to cut the steel, but to put a crease in. So I have this little hatchet-like tool, a hot cut, a V-block, and then the treadle hammer is a foot-operated hammer, about 30 pounds or so, that is very convenient, and I'll mention a little bit more about that in a moment. First, let's crease this. So I like to go texture side up, line it up nicely, and gently tap that until it conforms to the V-block. Not cut through the steel. And good, I've got folded over about halfway. But the steel, the part I hammered out is quite thin, so already that's cooled off enough to where I know I should stop and reheat that. I'm going to switch to a little lighter hammer. It's a 600 gram now. That treadle hammer is so useful because often I work by myself. What do you do if you don't have a treadle hammer? You can use the various clamp devices to clamp steel to the anvil so you can let go of the steel and you can hold your tool and, say, crease it. Even better, have an apprentice or a helper swing a sledgehammer for you. Now, I'm going to take the steel and slowly, carefully bend it over, trying to keep it somewhat symmetrical. Okay, I've got it folded over. kind of a taco shape. And now I'll open it up. So that folding over step really is what makes that crease down the center. We're going to go with the even smaller hammer for this next step. But first, let's open up the leaf. So to the treadle hammer, line up my hot cut. There we go. Okay. It's still hot enough where I can open it up. Got a crease, but now I want to make it a little more interesting, so I'm going to heat that up. I'm going to put a few marks in to kind of indicate veining as the anvil, and put a few marks in there to help indicate veins. Now, one end got a little bit funny shape from the last step, but I just corrected that. So there's one side. And there's the other side. Okay. So now I've got the general leaf. Now later on, I'll shape it so it looks a little bit more organic, a little bit more lifelike. But next I'm going to work on this area to make the stem. So the temperature I'm actually working at right now is I like about 2,000 degrees for this mild steel material. That seems to work well for me. Sometimes I go a little hotter, but for just general purpose forging, I find around 2,000 is good. Sometimes, yeah, 2,000. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is actually use the big hammer, and the back edge of the anvil is a rounded edge. I'm going to place the leaf shape there. If I use a sharp edge, it might cut or put a bad nick in the steel. I'm going to use the edge of the hammer and draw out, a blacksmith would say, or shape that steel into a thin stem. So here we go. One more heat to clean that up a little. And I'll knock the corners off. And I rotate to round and smooth the steel out. Okay, so now I've actually, it's square, start the square stock, and it transitions into a nice round stem. So an old saying in blacksmithing, if you run a round taper or point, is you go square, octagon, then round. You start forging square because it's the fastest, most efficient way to move the steel. Then you knock the corners off to form an octagon. Then you knock those corners off and you have a round bar. Okay, so I'm going to heat a little longer area now. And I want to put a twist in my hook. So I'm going to work on this area next. To do that, I need a good even heat, good orange color. I'll clamp one end in the vise, one end with a wrench, and I'll twist it. Okay, so to do this, I actually like it leaf up, so I'm going to come over here and actually go like that. I'll put my wrench in and give it a good twist. You can go really many revolutions. You can make a very tight twist, a very loose twist. There's really many, many hundreds of variations of twists. Let's give it a simple twist. This one I made a little bit tighter than the sample. And then to help straighten it out, often I put the steel, the square on the corners in the vise, close the vise, and that helps straighten it. So I've made a nice twist there. So the next step is I'm going to put a little indentation, a little different style now. They go back and forth. Well, maybe not just yet. But these are the two that I use the most frequently for this style of hook. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go to this treadle hammer. I was checking the color of the steel. And then, actually, I don't need the V-block now, so I'll put this flat plate in, and then I'm going to use a ball peen hammer that I just slightly modified. I'm going to take this over here, line up, and stomp on it. Okay. Got a nice indentation in there. It's a little thing that really, I think, helps make it look like a well-finished, nicely shaped piece. If I don't have a countersink, that indentation, the screw head or the nail would stick out above the surface, which I just don't think looks as neat. So now I've turned it around. Now I'm going to use these other tongs. And one reason I like them, besides I could hold the leaf, but if I don't want to distort the leaf shape, I can go around the leaf and hold the stock behind the leaf. So they're handy for that. I do make quite a few tongs. These I did not make, but there's quite a few tongs I make. Smiths tend to make them as you go. If you have a hammer and an anvil, you can make your own tongs. You can make all kinds of tools. Tool making has always been a part of blacksmithing and part of the history of blacksmithing. And it's a lot of fun. So I like to make custom tongs to fit difficult to hold shapes. I like to make special hammers for special projects. And I like to teach people how to do that too. So now I've reached a nice color. What I'm going to do is stretch the end out to make the point of the hook. So I think I'm going to do that today over here. So usually when I make a taper, I hammer two sides and let the anvil do the other two sides for me, unless I see something I don't like a bad texture hammer mark. So I've made a chisel taper, much like a flat screwdriver, kind of a thin, narrow point. And now I'm going to curl it around, make a little curl at the end, like this. So to do that, I'm going to use this back edge of the anvil again, maybe go with a little lighter hammer. I'm curling it over the edge, advancing the steel forward slowly, and then I'll go up, tap, and then go down, tap, keep checking your shape, just as necessary. You can even go like this. Okay. So checking for straightness. Looks pretty good. So now I'm going to bend it around to form the hook. Would be the next step. So I'm going to heat that again. Now, when I form the hook, the area that I just shaped, the little curl at the end, I'm going to cool that in water like I've been cooling my tongs. And the reason I'll do that is I don't want to lose its shape. I don't want it to get squashed. So if I cool it, the steel will become harder, and that will keep it from deforming. I'm going to quench that. Oh, this hammer will be okay. In the bucket a little bit, and then I start shaping. Straightening things out, and then we're going to have to put it in the vise, give it a little tap for straightening, and then I'm going to come back to the vise after the next heat and shape the end of the leaf to give it that more organic shape I was talking about. Now, what I like to use to do that next step are these scrolling pliers or scrolling tongs. They're a lot like needle nose or chain nose pliers. So they're smooth and round. They work quite well. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. Got a good heat, so I'll go to the vise. Now, actually, I found I don't really need to clamp it in the vise. I'm just holding the steel in the vise. Makes it easier for me. You know, I think it actually should heat it up one more time to do the other side. Cooled off pretty quick. So back in we go. So you can see I go back and forth to the forge quite a bit, which is normal in blacksmithing. One of the wonderful things about blacksmithing, I think not only the hammering, but the twisting shows really how plastic the material becomes once it's hot. And it's just a great property of the material is that you can heat things over and over until you get the, the shape that you like. It doesn't affect the strength of it. Okay, that's better. Okay, so now, okay, so I've got a little bit of a ripple in the leaf, and I'm starting to shape the stem. So I think just a couple more heats and I'll be finished up with the leaf. So I mentioned this is mild steel, so it's just a general category of steel, one of the cheaper categories of steel that has good working properties. So what is it? It's iron with up to about 0.3% carbon in it is what we call mild steel. So it's not heat treatable, like say a file, for instance, would be a different kind of steel, something we'd call tool steel. It has a much higher carbon content, like maybe 1%. You might have other alloys in it. This doesn't have any other alloys in it. Now what I'm doing now is checking for straightness. I want things to lie nice and flat. And like that, I want it to sit flat on the anvil. And I'll show you why in a second. It's good to look at it from all sides. And you know, it is a 3D object, so it's going to be viewed from all sides. Not going to obsess about the straightness, but I do want it straight. While it's still hot enough, I can give it a few taps and make adjustments. Okay, I need to switch tongs. Those have now become awkward. Go back to the ones I started with. And there we go. Standing up. That's what I like, and the reason I do that is you need it to lie on a flat surface. So imagine this is a wall. These are wall hooks meant to go on a wall. If it's not flat on the anvil, it's not going to sit flat on the wall. Little trick I've learned. And then to finish cleaning it up, I use a wire brush. Now, some people may have been wondering why I've not been brushing the steel all along. I found with this particular gas forge and this kind of work, I don't need to brush the steel very often, in my opinion. With a coal forge, I would be brushing the steel constantly. You get chunks of coal that get attached, kind of burned to the surface. The fire scales actually looks a little different too. This just makes it look nicer, get rid of that excess scale. It comes off much easier when the steel is hot. This is still quite hot, so to cool it off, I'm going to quench it. Put that right in the water, cool it off. And that fast, that's already cool enough to hold in my bare hand. So, I'm going to show you this, and to finish up, I've got my leaf hook. I've done tapers, twists, use a treadle hammer, put an indentation. I've used a guillotine tool to do fullering, created a leaf, used scrolling pliers. So all these techniques in one piece of steel. And I think it's really fun that I was able to shape the whole hook without any additional material, just one piece of steel. So there you have it, a leaf hook. Thank you for watching my demo. And remember, if you're interested in blacksmithing, I do teach classes in this studio. And there's also other videos on the TMA YouTube channel. Thank you very much.